Hi there, this is Brent again, and welcome to day 4 of the Sustainable High-Level Productivity Follow-Up course. And so today's all about flow. We're going to be discussing flow and the flow state and what's required in order to attain it and kind of operate from it. Now, to just quickly recap, the first 3 days. So day 1, it was all about vision. So figuring out what your vision is, what are your highest priorities, what are your goals, what do you care about, what do you most want to get done in this lifetime, and starting to angle everything in that direction so that you're moving as quickly and as steadfastly as you can in that way that's most meaningful for you. Number 2 was about strategy. So it's like, okay, I know where the compass is pointing, but how do I actually get there? So it's like laying out the map, figuring out what needs to be done, say, by the end of the month. And then if I want to get there, what do I need to have done by the end of this week? And if I want to get there, what do I need to do today? And so having everything mapped out as best as you possibly can, even though we admit that no maps and no strategies and plans will ever really be perfect, but we just do as good as we can and we go with it and we trust. And then day 3 is all about implementation. So it's about, okay, now we know what we need to do. So it's a matter of actually doing the thing, getting ourselves to do the thing and doing that consistently so that our actions are actually reflecting our strategy, which is reflecting our values. So that as long as we're in implementation, as long as we're executing the plan, we're actually moving forward. We're actually going the right way. With time as it passes, we're moving closer and closer in the direction that we want to go and feeling that traction and the buildup of momentum that a lot of us are just really ready for. So all of that is day 3, days 1 through 3. So now it's important to mention that as we get into day 4, we're going to switch gears a little bit because days 1 through 3, they come from the more masculine side of productivity, creation, success, where we are planning and knowing and doing and making happen. There's a little bit of pushing, there's a little bit of force, there's a little bit of like that discipline element, that warrior element that we bring into it. It's like, okay, like I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna make this happen. And so there's a kind of a really, really nice feeling about that. But it needs, in order to attain the sustainable element of sustainable high-level productivity, we need to counterbalance it with the feminine aspects of it. And when we're coming at the feminine aspects of success and productivity and these kinds of things, there is there's a requirement to surrender. There's a movement into surrender and relaxation, valuing being at center. So when you're overly in the masculine area, it's like push, 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 push. But when we bring in the feminine element, what we're doing is we're sitting in the center of our throne and not demanding that things come more quickly than they need to. So a good example would be if you're growing crops. So say you're growing corn and you're doing as good a job as you possibly can growing the corn. So you're applying the right fertilizer and pesticides and whatever's required to do it. And so there's sort of a maximum that you hit up against where you're kind of going basically as far as you can until it's time for nature to take over, for nature's course to take over. After which, if you were to attempt to expedite the growing of this corn even more, so say you're kind of like, yanking on like a stalk of corn in order to make it grow, like obviously that would damage it. And anything else that we attempt to do would damage the crops. So the most intelligence that we can offer in order to be in this sustainable high-level productivity is actually surrender. It's actually the backward step. And it's about bringing our attention away from trying to force outcomes, which we can only do up to a point. We bring it to taking the backward step and focusing on what needs to be done now and making a point to surrender to and focus on and ideally enjoy the journey itself. So that's what we're going to get into presently, and it's the perfect complement, it's the perfect counterbalance to the other side. So there's a lot of paradox when we're talking about the flow state, when we're kind of bringing these together. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to present a couple of these paradoxes and we can talk about how you can work with them and how to work with them to your advantage more specifically. So probably the foremost one, the most important one, is this paradox of attachment to outcome. This is a one that I really love, and it comes up in a lot of sessions when I work with people, because a lot of us find ourselves rather polarized in one camp or the other. So we're either really attached to the outcome or we're detached from the outcome, and excessively so. So it works like this. To be attached to the outcome is to have a sense of need underneath what you're doing. So whether it's your exercise routine, your diet, whether it's your business, your studies, whatever, it's like, oh my God, I need to lose this weight. I need to get those grades. I'm doing this because I need to get this money. And there's the sense of constantly reaching forward. There's sort of a stretching and an exertion and an exhaustion that's happening as we are going about this endeavor. And even though there's a little bit, like, we actually can make progress from this place, we end up on a burnout course. It tends to be unsustainable, where we can't do this in the long term. It only creates short-term results. On the other extreme, we have a detachment from the outcome, but also a detachment from the effort. So we're actually saying, oh, like, it's sort of like you get all this sort of relatively novice spiritual talk where it's like, nothing matters. It doesn't matter if I get this or get that. It doesn't matter if I have money. It doesn't matter if I succeed. You know, an asteroid's going to come and blow up the planet eventually. Nobody's going to remember me anyways. What's the point? There's no point. You get that kind of existentialist, nihilist kind of thing where you're like, oh, like, there's the only thing that matters is the now. You know, the only thing that matters is just being in the now and kind of doing what feels right and enjoying from there. And so there's truth and there's falsehood in both extremes. And so ideally, in order to find flow, we need to merge these things together and take the best from both. The way we take the best from both is to practice what I call detachment from the outcome. It's this perfect balance of having everything aimed at the finish line. So if you are running a business and you want to get to the $1 million mark, what you're moving only in that direction, and you're learning and you're studying and you're applying and you're doing everything that you can to get there in that direction. But whereas when you're attached to the outcome, there's a sense of, I need to, like I'm falling behind and everybody else is getting there first, and I'm so lazy and I keep wasting all this time, and what's wrong with me? Stupid, stupid, stupid. You know, I need to do so much better, and I'm disappointing people, like all that kind of stuff, right? All this stuff that we say to ourselves. Instead of all that, there's a sense of, okay, I'm going as quickly as I can in that direction. And at the same time, I'm going to allow this to take as long as it needs to take. And I'm going to allow myself to enjoy the process. And I'm going to allow, here's a very simple maxim that you can work with. If it were not this thing that you're doing, it would be the next thing. So I suggest that you marinate in this for a little while, because this is a very profound concept that when we really grok it, it just brings us into flow. It's a flow-inducing maxim. If it were not this thing, it would be the next thing, which is to say that it's only this thing or the next thing, and then the next thing, when it comes into the now, when we're doing it, it becomes this thing. So it doesn't matter what level of success you're at. There will always be the next thing. It doesn't matter what task you're doing. If you're doing this task or the other one, it's still just something to do at the very end. Whatever station you're at in life, it's just this station. And it's a little bit ahead of this one and a little bit behind this one. But from the most scaled out sense, there's no position or accomplishment or possession or any one thing that you can accomplish in this lifetime that's significantly better than anything else. And that can come as quite a shock to look at, to hear, and to kind of consider. Because maybe as you're listening to this, you're in this place of like, well, man, like I have all these problems and I have debt and there's stuff that I'm working on. And it's not to deny the fact that if you have debt, like it'd be better to have like a surplus of money. And if you're behind on your grades, it'd be better to have like better grades. Like obviously it's better. Like otherwise, what direction would we even move in? How would we have progressed out of day one to begin with? So obviously it's better to move in the direction of more success, more abundance. But when we start treating just this now moment, so whatever this task is or whatever this day is or wherever you find yourself in life, if you start just treating this as an obstacle to get to this other place, as if you were under this impression that you're gonna find something of absolute value when you get there, like foundational, like happiness, like, oh, like, once I get there, I'll be good. You know, I'll be okay once I get there. That is false. That is not true. This sense of being well and just good and stable and balanced and just feeling, okay, things are good and in control and stable and I'm okay. I'm just deeply, fundamentally okay right now. That is only available now. Only. That's the principle of flow. Because when you access that, which again, you can only do now, only in a now moment, just like this one. When you access that flow, when you access that understanding, or rather, when you access that sense of okayness, then the sense of impatience and urgency that you have about your life can finally start to dissolve. You don't have to feel so impatient and urgent about life anymore. This low-level anxiety that kind of makes you feel always on edge. It's like, oh, not enough. I'm not doing enough. I don't have enough. I haven't succeeded enough. I'm behind. There's no time left. You know what I'm talking about? This underlying instability that all of us just live our lives from. That can finally start to dissolve. You don't have to feel that way. Instead, your whole experience can be undergirded with a sense of stability. It's very much like when you're playing a video game, if you're one who plays video games, or any game really, you know, a sport, board game, whatever. When you're playing it, notice how you're able to play with the intention to win. You intend to win. And that's where all your effort's going. And yet, you're aware, especially if it's like one of these campaign, like beautifully illustrated video games, you're aware that once you get to the end, that's when it's over. So do you see how this paradox shows up where you're going all the way for it? It's like, yeah, like I'm moving towards the end, but also I don't exactly want to get to the end, or I'm not so urgent to get to the end because I know that it'll be over. So the same applies to you in your life. It's like, yeah, but once you get there, that's when it's done. Like once you finally arrive at the end of your life. And like, so, and the funny thing is that like when you get to the end of your life, that's when all your questions will be answered. How am I going to end up? Will I end up like this? Will I end up like that? Will I succeed in this? Will I won't succeed in that? All your questions are answered. You can finally look, but then guess what? Game is over. And so, you know, that's it. You know, unless you want to insert coins and continue on to the next life. So something to keep in mind, attachment to the outcome. So it's not enough to just be disengaged and to just like move to some sort of tropical paradise and just spend the rest of your life doing nothing in heaven, laying in a hammock. Like if that sounds good to you, maybe it's because you're overworked or overbusy, and you know, fair enough. But I think you and I both know that if you had a week of that or a month of that, you would get tired of it. Everybody gets tired of it. There's nothing about it that is sustainable. We're not designed to do that. We're not put together to just not work. We're here, we come out of the factory with gifts to give. We have work to do. We desire to engage and to be useful for people. So the point is not to get to this point where we don't have to work either. The whole thing is to be like in flow, which means full engagement with no worry, with no sense of like this basic rudimentary okayness that I'm talking about. None of that is caught up in the conditions of what you're doing anymore. We separate them. They're separate things. You have your okayness, which is just a de facto element of your existence. It's just who you are. You access it now. You don't need to meet any conditions in order to access it. You deepen your connection with it continuously and you move more and more into this wellness, and simultaneously you're living your life as skillfully as you can. That's flow. Yeah, really, honestly, that's it. Looking at my notes real quick, I think that's so in terms of what to do, like how do I actually practice this? How do I make this into something actionable? Play with this idea over the next few days, over the next 3 days. Play with this idea of, what am I trying to rush through? In what way do I feel impatient? In what way am I urgent? When does impatience and urgency show up in my life? And what we're looking for is like these kind of micro moments when maybe you're brushing your teeth, and every time you brush your teeth, you're like, oh, I'm just trying to get through. Just trying to get through. I hate brushing my teeth, but I do it anyway. Like that kind of thing. Pay attention to that. And then also on a macro sense, to what extent are you trying to rush through your whole life? Are you trying to rush through the week? Are you trying to get to your next vacation? What are you trying to get to? What are you always trying to get to? And would you be willing instead to let your experience be as it is right now? Because it's changing and improving. What you're doing will work. You stick with it, it'll work, but it is as it is right now. And would you be willing to live with your experience as it is right now? And stop being against it. Stop trying to hold yourself apart from it. Stop trying to get through it, but instead taking on a willingness to immerse yourself in these elements of your life that you're always trying to get away from. So hopefully that is a little bit more actionable for you. If you're in something that you're trying to get through, you switch it around by saying, I'm willing to do this. You want to emphasize the will aspect. That's how you get the flow online. You bring in your will. You say, I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to experience this. Even if you kind of have to, even if like somebody's like, you're your boss is telling you to do something and you don't really want to, but you're getting paid to do what they tell you to do. So there's sort of that obligation piece. Nevertheless, you're still choosing it. Because that way, when you choose whatever you're doing, you're bringing that intentionality back into it. And that's where you can find your power. And that's where you can find little hidden opportunities and ways to commune with what you're doing and to, at minimum, let the suffering go away. The frustration, the boredom, the tediousness of what you're doing, it can finally melt away when you say, I'm willing to do this. I choose this. I'm willing to live in this place. I'm willing to be in this situation. I'm willing to be where I'm at right now. I choose it. That's how your choice comes in. When you choose the things that you don't have choice over, and paradoxically, you have choice because you're choosing it, and then you're coming at it from that angle, and then more choice starts to make itself apparent to you. So that's the principle of flow. That's how to do it. That is the Sustainable High-Level Productivity Follow-Up course. I will have one more thing for you, one more video next, and it'll be a little bit shorter, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about something else that I have for you if it is up your alley. So I will talk to you tomorrow.